Next we have Dawn Kotowicz from URI, speaking about growing sugar kelp and its market opportunities for bearers in the northeast U.S.
My name is Dawn, and I'm gonna inundate you with kelp information. Apparently, we've been talking about seaweeds and kelp and now Rhode Island for quite a while, but I'm gonna keep going. But some of the information that I had planned to talk to you about has already been stated, so I might gloss over some of those things, but I'm gonna try to talk to you about some new things too. I would like to recognize my co-collaborators, Azure Sigler, who is currently on maternity leave, or she would probably be here presenting. Carol Engel, who's been mentioned several times. We are fortunate to have her expertise on this project, and then a master's student, Taylor Wickham. So, in thinking about kelp and the rise of kelp and its markets, we really are thinking about the rise of regional aquaculture. And on the East Coast, there's been a huge growth in aquaculture. There's been several data points discussed by other people, and it's primarily finfish, shellfish, and now we're adding sea vegetables to the mix. The primary source of growth has been in shellfish, and oyster landings along the East Coast have tripled in the past 6 years, and now the value has been estimated at $143 million. And this provides other than obviously the financial contribution to the region, it provides jobs in rural places, which are sorely needing these types of employment opportunities. And specifically in Rhode Island, it's one of the fastest growing industries, with over 90% growth between 2012 and 2015. So now we're starting to deal with kelp farming, and wild harvest has a long history, especially further north in Maine and then up into Canada. But it's a relatively new industry in terms of farming kelp in the Northeast. But it has a lot of growth potential. Spores are collected from the wild or generated within labs and grown in nurseries and then seeded on lines, grown often on the same gear structure as oysters, but higher in the water column, and then and so often you can use a lot of the structure that's already set out in shellfish farms. And it's recently been in the news a lot. NPR, I just looked, has done 6 stories about kelp in the past year, I think. And it's also becoming more widely recognized in the culinary world. Cooks Illustrated did a big highlighted it in an article, and they traveled to a farm in Rhode Island to showcase the potential for kelp, both in terms of its farming and aquaculture contribution, but also its potential as a food item. So this work really looks at kelp's potential. We know a lot of great things about it. It can provide shellfish farmers with an opportunity to diversify, grow something in the winter, and along with that, year-round employment for aquaculture farm workers. There's recently been a best practices guide published, so growing kelp is getting pretty well established. It has both human health and environmental benefits that are pretty well established, and we can look to the Asian markets for a lot of this information. It's going to be slightly different for us, but it's already been established, so we have sort of a path forward, especially with respect to health benefits. In the Northeast and in Rhode Island specifically, we have a lot of goals to increase our food security locally. And so growing kelp aligns with regional food goals where we can produce a healthy, sustainable, environmentally beneficial product that then can be consumed locally. And it has regional economic benefits. And then one of the big potentials that could be good or bad is that its markets are largely undefined and unexplored. So our project is to create a supply and value chain analysis of kelp markets. And some of these have been established. I'm not sure if Maine got to market first or Connecticut got to market first, but those two states have largely been ahead of the curve, and now the other states in the region are following. So we have some established supply chains, and then we have some potential supply chains. And Carol Engel has been our partner to actually put together the numbers for this supply chain. And this is an example of a different aquaculture supply chain. It's actually for finfish in Southeast Asia because we don't have one yet. But this is an example of how the analysis will work, where we will look at the major cost of the inputs, the production, then wholesalers and processing and retailers, and on to consumption, and hopefully identify some price points and some potential barriers and opportunities for moving forward. So we're collecting this information through a variety of different methods, and one of them is focus groups. Our first focus group was with Rhode Island growers, and one of the great things about it, we had 100% participation, which is only 9 farms, but still we were excited about it. We hope to hold focus groups with growers, regulators, institutional buyers, retailers, and chefs to talk about their perceptions of kelp, their connection to kelp, and seaweeds more generally, and to identify the market pathways for this product. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with focus groups, but one of the great things about focus groups is it's not to try to achieve consensus, but to try to have the participants interact with each other's responses and generate different types of ideas for consideration and identify different advantages and disadvantages of things that other people are mentioning. One of the great things about this focus group specifically was that we had a list of topics that we wanted to cover, and we got to a point in the focus group where one of the growers was actually asking all of the other growers the list of topics that we had already put out. So we didn't have to ask them ourselves, we just sat back. But it also provides a great opportunity for people who are in this new industry to get together and talk to each other. And several of the growers afterwards thanked us for convening the focus group because they looked at it as an opportunity for networking with each other. The other way we're collecting this information is through consumer surveys. And the kinds of information we're looking at is based on seafood marketing type consumer preference surveys that have been conducted before. But we want to understand previous experience with eating seaweeds and how it was prepared, and whether they're generally interested in it or if it totally turns them off, and then specifically what kinds of preparations would be most interesting for people to try. Here are a few examples that we're hoping some people will be familiar with. The first one on the left is a seaweed chip. It's just simply dried seaweed, and most of that product currently comes from Asia. The next one is a smoothie that seaweed has been added to, and I'm not sure how many of you have had a kelp smoothie, but it tastes almost the same, a little saltier. The next one is a granulated dried product that can be added as a seasoning. And then finally, it's seaweed noodles that are processed. They're primarily being processed in Connecticut.
Excuse me, were those pictures shown in your survey?
Some of them have been shown in the survey. A couple of them we switched out with other things. So we have identified that there is the potential for both fresh and processed direct sales, and some of the likely places that it might go are to restaurants and supermarkets, and to farmers markets, and then to universities. And obviously this is where most things go. We're trying to identify within these where is most likely, both from a regulatory standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, and then from a grower and buyer standpoint. And one of the opportunities that came up in the Rhode Island focus group was that most of the growers that we have in Rhode Island are also oyster growers. So they will go to oyster farms and bring their oysters and then say, oh, by the way, do you want some of this kelp? And that seems to be an easy way to get chefs familiar with the kelp, excuse me, but also start opening up markets. So, excuse me, we did identify some really great opportunities just in the few focus groups that we've done so far. There are some successful growers in Maine and Connecticut primarily that are really leading the way. They're establishing connections, they're creating publicity, and increasing public interest and knowledge about this new product. There's especially a growing interest from foodies and health advocates, and one of the things we are hoping to do in the near future is to establish a better baseline for the nutritional analysis of kelp in the region. And then we're hoping, as I said in the last slide, to capitalize on some existing relationships, especially with oyster sales. Oyster bars in the Northeast are a huge boom for business in rural coastal towns that are dealing with a variety of different and sometimes conflicting commercial interests. But oyster bars are accessible to locals and to visitors alike, and it's one place where we see a really great opportunity moving forward. There are some challenges that have been identified, but actually a lot of these could be overcome to the advantage of the kelp markets. With a fresh product, there's really no competition for kelp. We're familiar with the dried product that comes from Asia, but the fresh product is really new. And that's both exciting and intimidating, depending on who you talk to and in what context. Along those lines, chefs especially one of our growers said they're excited about it, they want it, but then they get it and they're not really sure what to do about it. So one of the ways we'd like to move that forward is to showcase culinary events where kelp is highlighted and could be presented to people and allowed for them to try it and see if they like it. And then, as you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, it doesn't look all that attractive in certain in its certain forms. So there are some challenges, but a lot of people see that and equate it to other types of health food that they're familiar with consuming. So we need to see how we move things forward in that vein. And one of the really exciting ways to move that forward is with vegan and vegetarians who are looking to get omega-3s, and it's really difficult to get omega-3s from non-seafood products. So this is one vegan/vegetarian product that could be marketed in that way. And then market regulation is undeveloped from a regional standpoint, especially in terms of after it's harvested. Department of Health has different concerns when you move to different state lines, and it's really a challenge that we as extension agents would like to facilitate overcoming, so that for a region, when growers grow, they understand where what the requirements are and what the opportunities are as they consider their markets regionally. And then there are some things to work through. We're still refining the process for successful growing in different locations. We need more sources of string and hatcheries, and along with that, more opportunities for processing. And one restaurant owner said, if you give me a recipe with a lot of volume of kelp, I'll start buying it. A lot of the recipes have teeny tiny bits of kelp added as like an additive or a little special twist, but not mainly kelp. So there's this new cookbook that just came out. It's cooking with kelp, so that's pretty cool. So we're hoping that helps us to overcome that. And then finally, it's a short, fresh shelf life, so we have to look for new opportunities for processing. The next things we're going to do are holding more focus groups. We hope to meet with the growers in Maine and Massachusetts in the next couple months. And then we've set up an interesting focus group with university buyers and university chefs, because we really want to understand, well, what are chefs asking the buyers for, and how could the buyers be able to supply this? And then with retailers, we're also doing consumer surveys at farmers markets and seafood events all around the region, and we're tasting some more kelp. So thank you.
Thank you. Quick question for Dawn while we get switched over here.
What is
Mike?
the
Oh,
omega,
I'm sorry.
What is the omega-3 content?
I have seen several different nutritional analyses, and they all have very different values. And that's one. So my understanding is that geographically that can differ a lot. So that's one of the things that I'd like to. It would be great if we had that information.
Mike?
Just real quickly. I mean, I asked this to various groups several years ago. We got a resounding no, but then I knew so I thought I would him because I'm very stubborn. But you were saying kelp and seaweed kind of growing at a high rate from Connecticut all the way to Maine, various places we're seeing it in Oregon, Washington, Alaska. A lot of it, when I talk to groups in isolation, it's the same bullet list. Is it time to try to get a mechanism to communicate from one coast to the other to work out things like asset plans and new products and that kind of stuff? Or
So I haven't thought. Our project is in the Northeast, but I haven't thought about crossing over and how many of the same issues are being encountered on the West Coast as to the East Coast. But one thing that everyone I talk to is interested in is apparently Dana Morse and was it Sarah Redmond?
Yeah.
Had a yearly seafood gathering of growers and other people in the industry that sort of that was mostly based in Maine and had a couple people go up there from other states. But we're looking at reconvening that on a regional scale in the Northeast. So I think it would be a great opportunity to float that kind of idea to get the different coasts together.
Yeah, it may be hard to get people from the Gulf Coast, but we can do it electronically. The other thing is that NOAA has bilateral aquaculture relationships on the science side with Japan and Korea, where if you would try and arrange a study tour to see how those cultures have used kelp. I know sugar kelp in Japan has 150 different products.
So I went to a few. I have a few quick bits. I went to the Boston Seafood Expo, and I talked to somebody who was standing at a booth with I don't even know how many products. And there are tons of products over there. I know at least one of our growers from Rhode Island has spent some time, both in Japan and in Korea, looking at that. And Carol Engel has recommended that we look into some of the published literature from over there, because it's very well established. Like, a lot of these issues that we're encountering have been overcome there. So,
Probably super easy just to go there.
Right.
Go there and talk to other people.
yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to roll it along here.
Thank you.
There'll be a break in a few minutes. Thank you.